Do you know what threats are currently targeting your company? Stick around as we discuss threat research.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us as we continue our series in CySa Plus. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about threat research. And Dan, this was one that I honestly, I had to say, what is it?
I know it seems intuitive, like, well, we're researching threats.
Researching threats, sure.
Yeah. Why are you doing that? Because they're threats.
That's
and
right.
We need to know about them. Hello. That is kind of the answer, actually. It's kind of
It is, too. I was expecting something else.
Yeah, you can have that simplistic answer, but it ultimately comes down to a more complex answer, which is we want to understand the threats that may be attacking or are going to attack, possibly attack our organizations, our networks, our systems, whatever the case is, so that we can better defend against them. Now, there's some different types of threat research that we're going to look at today. Ultimately, there's a lot of blurry lines in this kind of business, so don't take too much stock in this is hard and fast. These are terms and definitions and things we're going to see throughout our security careers. So you'll see them in different avenues in different areas. But right now, we're just talking about threat research, and these are definite things that definite types of threat research that we'll probably engage in at some form or some time, right? So the first one we're going to start off with is let me remember, reputational. That's right, reputational threats. So what does that mean? What are you talking about when we say reputational? Basically, we're just trying to understand if let's put it this way. If I were checking out the logs to my SIEM or, excuse me, I'm looking at maybe I'm in a syslog server and I'm trying to identify threats and attacks that have been leveraged against our organization. Well, is this a real attack or is something I need to worry about? Understanding the reputation behind those actors could let you know whether or not this is something that's going to be more serious or less serious or whatever. So understanding their reputation could definitely steer you in the right direction as far as your defensive tactics go. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, let's say that you've noticed that somebody tried to DDoS your site or whatever, right? I'm pulling that out of the air, honestly. Someone tried to DDoS your sites, and you're looking at the logs. The IP address is there. You grab that IP address, you can run to something like Talos Intelligence Reputation Center, drop that in there and see if there's any reputational score or information available for that specific IP address. So let's take a look at that. I've got it open up. It's just a website. And to get there, you just go to this lovely little URL right here, talosintelligence.com/reputation_center. Excuse me. And that will get you to where you're going. This is it right here, and it has the IP and domain reputation centers. Maybe you have a domain name, and that's what you're going to look up. Maybe you got IP, maybe both, who knows? But you can drop them in here, and we can take a look. Really cool map, kind of showing where the latest threats in real time, right? It says, is the world's most comprehensive real-time threat detection network. And I can just kind of see what's going on. This green one says that it's malware. These blue ones are legitimate traffic. So a lot of legitimate traffic coming out of the Northeast right now. A little bit of malware happening if it's green, right? And then you can click on that and look what it does. Kind of pops open some IP addresses along with the domains that are associated with it. Last day volume and email type. It's saying that there's been some malware associated with this specific thing. And I can click on that IP address or I can click on the host name. Let's do that. And it'll start giving me some more data about that, specifically the reputational details is what I would want to see. Email reputation, I don't see a whole lot going on there, but it does give us some owner details over here. Here's the last volume, and you can hover over these little question marks to get more information. Email volume uses a log scale based of 10, so that's good to know. And it's 4.9, last month's been 4.8. It does say that it has a volume change. It's up 61%. So it's probably being utilized more often than not. And we're going to see some, it's not being blacklisted currently though. That's good to know. Maybe if I saw this was blacklisted and my security is not stopping, obviously, because it's making it through to a log, then I would go in, I would blacklist this IP as well, because it's a probable threat to my specific organization. I'm already seeing it in logs, so they're already doing something. And that's just a good way to like suss out whether or not this is an active threat that I need to worry about for my organization, or is this just, your run-of-the-mill scan or email or whatever, and it's just a generic phishing campaign. Who knows? That could be the case. But now this gives us a little better understanding of whether or not that's something we need to worry about for our organizations.
I love those heat maps, Dan. That
They are
is
great.
really, really cool because it gives you kind of like that instant visualization rather than having to get into the nitty gritty, and you kind of know what to click on right away, or maybe what doesn't affect you, especially when it's regional now. Now, the next concept here, I left it to where I don't understand what this concept is, and Dan and I, it was kind of funny. We were talking before the episode, and I decided to leave it from the learner's perspective. This is one I haven't heard, and this is an acronym, wait for it, that I don't know about. And that's something known as IOC. Tell me about indicators of compromise. How does that affect us as cybersecurity analysts?
Yeah, it will definitely start giving you an idea of, well, whether or not you've been breached. If you're seeing indicators of compromise, that's going to be an indication that something bad has happened. But what do we mean by that? Let's start with Wes's perspective. He's never heard of IOC. What is an IOC? Right? So what it means is, it's something that makes you go, I don't know that that is how this should be. And if it is like that, and that is the case, why am I seeing this, right? It starts to move you toward that question of, why is this thing here? Or why is this thing doing this? I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. Now, a lot of this will be very subjective to us and our experiences, our networks, right? But you do have some common threads of what an IOC might be. Like maybe I see some software or files on a system that are either unknown about or unauthorized. Right? There's a lot of times you work in a business environment, you've got, here's the list of approved software. And no, I'm looking at that list. I don't see that here. And yet there it is. I wonder what that is. So that's where you start turning in. If it is there and it's not authorized or it is unknown, how did it get there and why is it there? What is it doing? So that is an indication of compromise. That's an IOC.
So how about this, Dan? Does things like phishing scams potentially fall into this, or maybe high resource utilization within a system?
Exactly. Right.
Oh,
So
wait a
things-
second. That might be something.
Right. Things that could just be anomalous, but it could be like, why is this doing this? And it raises that eyebrow, especially if it's never done it before. So you go to the let's go to the idea of heavy utilization. Heavy network utilization on something that typically doesn't have that will definitely be something that will probably raise your eyebrow and go, why is that happening? And then you're going to fire up your network sniffer and start looking at some traffic. Maybe you've got something like SolarWinds or Fluke Networks, something to that effect. And you should start looking at that traffic and go, what is this? Let me look at top talkers. Let me see what kind of traffic it is. What is going on? Well, it's HTTP traffic. That's interesting. This is a file server. Why is HTTP traffic happening? See how that would be an indicator of compromise. It's doing something that it normally should not be doing, right? It's going to be a lot of unknown or unauthorized type of things. I just made myself a little list of things like of that nature. Port and protocol usage, right? Like we just discussed there. Excessive bandwidth, suspicious account usage, right? I start seeing an account doing things that it normally doesn't do or shouldn't try to do. I'm gonna want to investigate that, right? A couple of other things: suspicious registry entries. Like, what is that, right? Suspicious emails, Wes. I think you brought that out. If I've noticed that a lot of people are complaining about their computer, maybe it's got heavy bandwidth utilization, CPU or whatever has gone up, and I go, well, let me take a look, and I see they all have a common email had come through, and it's a phishing email, and they all click the link, and now they've got malware, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm seeing a file that I don't recognize, so on and so forth. A lot of times these things just kind of chain together. So that's an indicator of compromise.
So how about something like this, Dan? Just to give us a scenario. Maybe you've got a mobile system or a wireless system. And you go and you check the AP, or not the AP. I'm sorry. You check the IP is what I meant to say. Yeah, IP configuration, and you're like, wait a second. where is it getting this IP address? I'm aware of what our DHCP scope is within our servers on our networks, and now I'm getting a 192 when maybe our IP addressing scheme's a 10 dot. Could that be an indicator?
Exactly, right? Anything that seems off, like I said, this is going to kind of like really rely on your knowledge of your own environment. The fact that, like Wes pointed out, I know we're a 192 network. Why is this getting a 10 dot or whatever, right?
Yep, absolutely.
That's going to be, why is that happening? And then you're going to investigate that. And investigating those IOCs are going to start probably coming up with commonality. You can see, oh, this is a common attack vector that is being used. That phishing email, we keep seeing it, right? So we need to really ramp up defense against phishing because we keep seeing that phishing email. Or it's coming, and then of course you can run right back to reputational. Let's check the domain for that. Oh yeah, it's known as malware distribution with phishing, and it's got a reputational score of whatever. That lets you know this has been blacklisted by multiple different vendors, so on and so forth. You start to see how you put these things together to try to understand those threats that are being lobbed against you and your organization.
Seems like a lot of this stuff obviously ties together. That's why you're putting it within one objectives. But how does things like behavioral threat research come in? When we're talking about behavioral, right, it's obviously there's going to be some kind of action or some kind of, I guess action that we're aware of or maybe we're not aware of. Where does that fit into it?
Yeah, so behavioral is where you start to actually take a look at the threats that we know about out there in the world. Right, that we have discovered this is a threat. You need to be aware of these people. And not just they have a reputation, but what is it exactly that they do, right? So this is called TTPs, which is tactics, techniques, and what is it? Procedures. Yes, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Horrible with acronyms, as if I haven't copped to it yet, I will multiple times. I'm horrible with acronyms. But we want to take those and we want to start to basically become like an FBI profiler. If I can profile a specific type of threat, I can then understand what's most likely going to come my way, right? Now, MITRE, the attack framework, that's what it's all about. So if you're watching this out of order, maybe you haven't seen that show yet, but we have an episode that talks about attack frameworks and to help us do this very thing, understand those TTPs so that we understand what might be coming our way. And so therefore we can better defend against that and kind of prioritize things. MITRE, their attack framework will really help out with this specific type of thing.
I think isn't MITRE one of the ones that kind of maintains the CVE database?
I think they do.
Yeah. Hey, how about a scenario maybe for behavioral? And one of the things that's coming to mind when you said threats that we've seen before and how that applies to us. Let me give you an example and see, Dan, if it falls under it. A few years ago we had side channel attacks that were happening. Again, manufacturers putting in some kind of rogue device on your PCB or printed circuit board or whatever, and it caused a major dying DNS outage, right? A major, massive distributed denial of service attack, and it was, things like smart TVs. So maybe I'm a company that has a lot of displays within my lobby. Maybe I have a lot of these smart TVs, let's just say as an example, and we're aware that this is happening to those devices. Would that be a way that we would turn around and we could turn our attention back internally and say, hey, we've got some of those devices and maybe that could affect us?
That's exactly the idea, right? You're trying to see how do these threats typically operate? Mm-hmm. And then does that apply? Would that be something that we kind of would be falling inside of that sphere of their operations? If we are, well, then we need to really pay attention to that and see, okay, let's start looking at their reputation. Let's look at their TTPs, and then we can bolster up defense so that we are better prepared for if and when that they come after us because we're in their sphere, their scope. So let's jump into MITRE real quick, just a refresher, take a look at what that looks like. And you can see it's got a bunch of the attack matrix for enterprise, right? And then starting from the top, it's just showing you initial access. So do they do a drive-by compromise, exploit-facing, public-facing applications, external remote services, hardware additions, replication, so on and so forth. And they even have this cool tool called the Navigator, which basically has all those different TTPs, and I can start to highlight and say, okay, this is something that we need to worry about because we do have a public facing application. So maybe that's going to be our avenue of ingress, right? The initial access. So I'll highlight that. And then I'll go and I'll look at different threats and I'll see which one of them uses public facing applications for their normal access, their normal initial access. And then I can highlight that again. I can start to overlay these things and see, oh, and it's funny, it's cool. It'll change colors and stuff because you start color coordinating these things and it'll let you know, here are your major problems or the most likely ways in which they might actually use this thing. And it's got a little tool set up here. I definitely check it out, play around. I'll put this in the show, in the not the show notes, the learner resources for you, so you can check out this page. And of course, the MITRE ATT&CK will be there as well. Really good stuff, and that will give you that ability to run through this. So, do they do things like, are they DOSers? Do they like to DDoS you? Do they like to use malware, viruses, worms, that kind of thing? What does their recon typically look like, and how can I spot that in my logs? So again, we're starting to profile these people. If they're an APT, what kind of command and control services do they use? Where do they go? What's the IPs associated with them? How do we normally see that? All right, so you're going to want to look those things up. A couple of things that can be used by APTs as well. I just wanted to point out port hopping. Check the ports. Simple Nmap scan will do that, or something like a netstat, where you can check and see what kind of connections are being made. If you see some ports that are odd, that might raise a flag. And even IDSs, IPSs, and things of that nature, firewalls, they can monitor that, but they'll try to use port hopping to evade those types of detections. So they might move from one port to another, to another, to another, or even use open ports. So, but again, a lot of devices that we have nowadays can detect that, hey, port 80 is being used for something other than HTTP. You might want to check that out and send you an alert. But it's a cat and mouse game, right? Other thing was fast flux DNS. Really cool, actually, or this is used to defeat IP blacklisting. What it does is it rapidly changes the IP that is mapped to the domain, so that if you've got, right, if you got the blacklist happening for that IP, it's like, that's cool, or that domain, it changes. Basically the same kind of thing as port hopping, just with DNS and IP addresses. Changing constantly so that you can never get a real grasp on who it is that's attacking you. Very smart stuff. And of course, data exfiltration techniques, be on the lookout for those and how it's being done. Maybe one person uses the HTTP channel, or they tunnel everything through HTTPS, or maybe they're using SSH, FTP, who knows, right? ICMP, all these covert channels that could be spun up and used. You want to understand what type of channel is being used. So let's say that I know APT group 23 is right in my wheelhouse for our business. So what kind of data exfil do they typically use? What is their covert channel? Well, they like to exfil over ICMP or DNS records. All right, let's say DNS record. So I'm going to want to start really inspecting DNS traffic for covert exfiltration, right? So great stuff. That's how we start to better protect ourselves, by profiling those things through behavioral analysis of those threats. Wes, that's what I got for today.
All right, Dan. Well, great explanations. And I don't know why I can't get this out of my head. When you talked about port hopping, the only thing I could think of is like Irish line dancers.
Oh, Michael Flatley, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do this. Absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot of concepts here when it comes to threat research. Remember behavioral. Remember indicators of compromise. We also talked about reputational. And then finally, data exfiltration. Well, it's IT. Information technology, and you got to protect that information. We got a lot more coming in the CySa Plus shows, but it's going to require you to join us there. So hopefully we'll see you there.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.